Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Market Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, November 17th. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're talking about is for information purposes only. Everything that we're going over is for education purposes only. That was the risk disclaimer, and if the video is a little bit blurry, it's just because YouTube takes a while to render the high definition version of the video. Just give it a little bit more time. So let's get to the market recap here. A little bit of volatility on the tape today. I feel like it's a little bit of deja vu all over again in terms of in terms of the price action. It seems like one day we are getting a tape that's very good to trade. I talked about that in the pre-market session, Tribeca Trade Group, that we do every day at about 9:05 in the morning. I just talked about how yesterday we got a really nice trending day in terms of price action, which we don't get a lot of those days, to be honest, right? One of the observations that I was talking about again this morning was that the overnight moves have really slowed down, right? If you look over time, and you could Google this, I'm not going to bring this up right this second, but over time, if you buy the close and sell the open, right, that is a very profitable trade versus doing it the other way around, right? I know there's a lot of day traders out there who think that there's a lot of opportunities during the day, and there are, but if you buy the close and sell the open, right? That is a huge moneymaker over the last 30 years. And again, 30 years, right? Not just the latest, last couple of years. That's just the way the relationship is. However, the last couple of weeks, and I was posing this questions to traders earlier in the day, saying, how many times are you guys looking at futures these days in the overnight session? Because you open up, whatever app that you look at to check futures, and it's like plus or minus 10 basis points. So it's been, and I'm not trying to jinx it or anything like that, but I'm just observing that the last few weeks it has been very quiet in the overnight session. There really just is not that much of a move. So really, it kind of dictates. Going into, because usually what I like to do is kind of put on some positions at the end of the day and then take them off, right around the open, and then kind of see how the market is going. But lately, that really hasn't been the trade, and you kind of get this feeling in the first 15-20 minutes that there's some selling that's going on. We've seen that a couple days where the VIX kind of spikes up for the first 15 or 20 minutes, and then things kind of settle down. But today was more like, when I say deja vu all over again, it seems like we're getting one decent day of a trending day or some more, higher than average trading setups, and then you'll go through another day and it'll be like, hey, the market's a little bit iffy, and that kind of was how it felt like on Monday, right? Today's Wednesday, so Monday it kind of felt a little bit risk off feel. Tuesday was risk on, and then today felt like another kind of risk off day. And typically the things that I look at around the open, which have kind of helped me a lot in terms of saying, hey, do I want to be really aggressive with this tape, or do I really want to just back off and sit on my hands, right? And I think going back to Monday's video, I talked about the same exact concept, sitting on my hands when I see that the breadth is not very good, when the VIX is going higher, right? And then, of course, the price action for confirmation. So that's kind of what today was. So it was one of those days where, the VIX went up about 5%. Again, we're kind of hanging around this, if we want to look at the VIX, I don't really think there's anything major to kind of look at here, other than, we're just kind of holding this level a bit around this 16 to 17 level for the last couple days. And, it's obviously higher than where we were in the beginning of the month and most of October. The middle of October, I should say. So it's a little bit higher than that, but it's lower than what we hit back on the 10th. All right, so that's the VIX, and there's not a lot of conclusions there to draw. But again, I like to look at these charts every couple of days just to see what's going on there. So that was the VIX of 5%. You could see this breadth on the bottom left, right? We have this market web breadth indicator, which just kind of associates volume with the advancing and declining names, right? And you could see whenever I have like deep yellow like that and red, right, that's what I associate with, hey, the wind is more in your face in terms of at your back in terms of advancing versus declining names. And if we look at the raw data here, the Dow had 23 decliners today, 7 advancers, S&P 342 declining and 161 advancing. And then really where that a lot of times where that breadth is driven from is NASDAQ, which had over 2,000 declining issues and 829 advancing. So not great breadth. Why is this kind of concerning too with market breadth? Well, we've kind of been sitting up here, and I tend to look for. Again, I'm not going out of the way to look for things, but I try to make observations. And one of the things is we don't really want to see more declining breadth when the market's up here and kind of grinding higher, because that is what's known as a divergence. So the more that we spot divergences, the more it's like, the market may be weakening a little bit. So one day's not a trend, and like I said, it's been back and forth. Yesterday was stronger breadth, right? The day before that was a little bit weaker, and I think today was weaker than what we saw on Monday. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye on. The other thing is too, as we entered the week, we kind of I don't make, if you watch these videos regularly, I don't make predictions. But there are things that are kind of, very easy to point out, observations to point out. And one of which is that it's option expiration this week and monthly option expiration this week. And if you've been trading this year, that the third week of the month has been choppy, and that's kind of what we have right now. So I think that's par for the course, right? That's exactly what we talked about in the Sunday macro video that I sent to members. Is that we have some a decent amount of economics this week, but really it's that third week of the month that seems to be seasonal. I don't know if that's fully attributed to monthly option expiration or just some other seasonal factors, but it seems like that's the story. That just bottom line, and I'm going to go over some charts here in just a second, but it just tells me not to go crazy with taking risk, right? And you'll see from my trade blotter that I actually I took off some trades, a couple out of frustration that, you take 2 targets in a trade and then, like yesterday, and then it reverts all the way back, to your cost basis or even below your cost basis from yesterday. So that's just whippy price action. And, I've been very quick with taking off trades and probably frustrating some members. So if you hate me for doing that, it is what it is. I just try to make adjustments to what the market's giving me. But I do during these weeks, as well as just, looking at the overall level of the market, I'm kind of a little bit 1 foot out the door in terms of position taking, right? And I keep the positions on that I have a little bit more confidence in. But if I take a shot at something and it immediately doesn't work off the bat, odds are I'm just going to take the position off, right? That's that's just maybe lack of conviction in some positions that I'm putting on. So I didn't really go over this, but again, I try to be a member told me just a little while ago, just thanked me for the transparency. Yeah, I mean, I don't just talk about the winners, right? In this video, you're going to hear me talk about some winners, but you're going to hear me talk about some losers too, because I'm completely transparent with what I do. I give my results every month. I post them on Twitter. And there's no hiding that, right? And there's none of this like you'll find in my videos if you're a newer viewer of my videos. Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and there's no I'm not a salesperson, right? I'm not a which is what you find a lot on Twitter, right? Is salespeople. They're always selling you on something, in terms of, hey, look at this chart. This chart is going to do this. I post setups, right? And we talk about, areas where I think are set up good for risk to reward, right? And every trade that I put on, I always have an out. I always know where the trade isn't going to work, right? And that's very important, planning the trade. So it's none of this like, oh, this is going to go sky high and this is going to be, this is going to blast off to the upside. I really try not to use those types of adjectives because it really gives people a false sense of what you're trying to do. Some people will, I know because I have now a decent amount of followers. I'm not the most popular person on Twitter, but I have a decent amount of followers, and that's the last thing that I want to do is say a whole bunch of things on Twitter that gives people that thinks that I am confident that I'm going to hold the position or that I know something. Let me break it down for anybody who's new on Twitter or new to investing. There's nobody that knows, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows what's going to happen next week. So the fact that some people are like, hey, this group of stocks or whatever that this thing is going to make, is going to just blast off to the upside and so forth. You don't know that, and you don't know what's going to happen in a week. So anyway, let me get back on track. But I vent a little bit sometimes in these videos, but it's important. There's so much trickery on Twitter, right? That I find it very interesting how people hold themselves on Twitter, and then as soon as the trade doesn't work, oh, I didn't mean that. It's like, okay. Anyway, let me get down to it. REITs were actually the best performer, or one of the best performing sectors throughout the session. This is a group I talked about the other day that I thought was showing some signs of strength. And it kind of backed off a little bit from doing that yesterday. But still, I'm going to go over a couple setups within this group that I think are kind of interesting. The home builders, which have been super strong, they were actually, I believe, your best performing sector when you talk about equities. They were up about 80 basis points. Consumer discretionary was also up a little bit more than 0.5%. Your gold miners were up almost 1%. Agriculture commodities were up again, right? That's the DBA ETF, right? That has been breaking out. Really interesting to see what's been going on with commodities. I talk about these pre-market, but nat gas, right? We've been talking about this now for a few days, that nat gas is below the 50-day moving average, regardless of the rhetoric that you hear about in the news, right? You are actually seeing nat gas prices, they're hanging on to the September low, right? But I see them below value. I see nat gas below the 50-day moving average. And what else joined this below the 20-day moving average, below the 50-day moving average as well, was crude oil. Right, so we haven't seen that since August, where crude oil fell below the 50-day moving average. So, for instance, I was in, I'll kind of bring this back to trading, is I took on a new energy position yesterday, right? And I think I took one quick target in that trade, and I took it off, right? If I always will go in the direction of what the underlying commodity is. If I'm playing something of the likes of an energy company or an agriculture company, or something like an FCX, like a metal company, right? If I start to see copper breaking down, right, I'm not going to want to be in FCX. And take a look at that as well, right? That's a big move down in copper. So there's some things that are changing a bit, right? I talked about divergences a few minutes ago in this video within like breadth and so forth. But it's the same thing that you're seeing too, that copper is down 3.6% today. You could see that this has been weak since then, right? And it kind of it's starting to be more and more of a head scratcher, right? Because some of these things, when you look at copper, when you look at oil, right, they are a little bit of an indication of global output, right? And if these things are falling, right, and if you couple this, which again, I don't make a lot of decisions off of this, but I do kind of look at what this Baltic Dry Index is doing, right? Which has been, has moved all the way back. So has given this back. So again, something seems to be going on here. And again, I'm not sure if I want to make a conclusion yet, But when you've got copper going down, when you've got oil going down, nat gas is going down, and the Baltic Dry has been moving much lower since it made those highs back in the beginning of October, something may be changing in terms of economic activity. We're not really seeing that yet in terms of the U.S. economics, but that's something to watch out for, right? So, for example, we got ISM data about a week and a half ago, I think it was, very strong. So that's been strong. We got retail sales this week. That's been strong. We've been getting housing data, and the housing NAHB survey was better than expected. So again, it's kind of a mixed picture right now, right? Remember, like a week ago too, we got, I think it was the beginning of last week, small business optimism, which was the lowest point in several years. Friday, we got Michigan sentiment. That was the lowest in 10 years. So there's some things that are not, fitting with really, really bullish economic activity. So again, it's something to keep an eye on. And if you feel a little bit uneasy about some of these things, what do? You make some adjustments. Okay. Let me go over some stocks with you guys. Apple is the first one, right? So again, I will talk about a winner first, and then I'll go over. But we hit this trade perfectly yesterday, right? I noticed that this was on the cusp of breaking higher, so I kind of put on a preemptive position before it broke, right? A lot of option activity. Guys, this is how it works sometimes with option activity. They're just chasing, right? We see this a lot of times where all of a sudden they will buy a huge amount of calls in a day, and that's it. And there's no follow through from that. I'll give you another example. But as I put this on Twitter, right, this was just a quick trade that I was looking for, a move basically from 150 to about 150, 154 and change. So I got that. Here's what I did, right? So I took targets in the trade that I had from last night, right? I just had some December, so short-term calls on. Anything for me under 60 days is called short-term. I know some people have different opinions about that, but I got out of my December calls, right, 370 from 230 yesterday, and I rolled them a little bit into January calls, right? I want to give it a chance to see if maybe we do get a breakout in Apple, right? But if it hits where I thought it was going to go in the short term, I take the majority of the trade off, and that's what I did today. And I left, I rolled out calls so I have a little bit more time in case this wants to go sideways and so forth. But the other example, remember last week, right? They bought a ton of FCX calls one day. Notice where this thing got to, right? It got up to that VPOC, Virgin Point of Control, right, where a lot of buyers and sellers have previously met up at this point of control. It tagged this thing, and that was it, right? So again, if you're chasing some of this option activity, right, you're going to get, the majority of the times, if you're chasing this option activity, it's not going to work, or it's going to work for a day trade. Right, you have to be very careful with option activity. I know it's very popular, and it's been very popular over the last few years on Twitter and so forth. But if you follow over and over and over option activity, you're gonna wind up with pennies, in my opinion. Now, there's some good trades, and I'll talk about a couple of them. There's some really savvy trades, but I'm talking about overall, right? Whatever ones that they talk about are the most important, that are the standout ones that see the most volume. A lot of times they end up like this, right? Where it's all the option activity on that day. And if you catch it early, it's great for a trade, but look at it, right? It reverted all the way back, right? And then what happens is nobody talks about it on Twitter. Now, what would happen if FCX would go up to 43 or 44? Everybody would be talking about, oh, those calls last week. Oh, that was such a good signal, right? But because it was a one-day move, right, you don't hear anybody talk about FCX anymore. That's how, since I've been trading options as an individual investor, that is how it always works. Everybody jumps up and down when it works. When it doesn't, it's crickets. Nobody says, oh, I guess they didn't know. Or, oh, I guess it was just a play for that day and there was nothing else behind it. So anyway, that's FCX. I would not pay attention to the stock until it gets back above 41, and also until you see a copper go higher. Datadog, this was tricky, and this is kind of what I'm referring to too in this video. I know I've been kind of going on about this point, but we're seeing some false moves like this too, right? I've been pointing them out in the room just to kind of, in the software space, and maybe just because, the momentum has gone to different places, but this is tough, right? In the very beginning of the day, this goes up to 199, closed at 190. Right, so this has been happening in a few different names. Asana was another name, right? And I think this was on Monday. Right, look at this thing, goes up to 145, and then completely just there's no follow through on that. So I'm starting to see this a bit more frequently. Okay, again, just something to be mindful of right now in this market. All right, so again, if I seem bearish, I'm not bearish. I'm always concerned, right? And sometimes I think in these videos too, price action is great or bullish, right? Price action is not so good. It's more of a bearish tone, but it's really just what the market is kind of giving you for the day. I mentioned I would talk about one that I thought was good for option activity. That's HLT, right? All right, so if we look at this 1 hour and this, why did I think that this was a good signal today when I saw Hilton calls on the tape? Just because the technicals looked pretty good. Notice that this thing has had a big move up to 154 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 red bars in a row into support. 50-day moving average. So I actually took 3 targets in this trade just because the way that this tape is not consistent every day, right? One that I took off today that was a winner yesterday was Dick's Sporting Goods. And, it actually ended up okay. It held the 5-day moving average, but I just didn't like that it was giving back too much of the gains from yesterday. So I got out of this one. I mentioned I was in a energy name. I got out of CPE. Right, I was looking for this thing to kind of fill in here and then stretch the highs. It may still do that, right? And like I said, I'm not giving much time on some of these trades if they start to move the wrong way. Again, I didn't like the move in crude. Just convinced me to kind of get out of that name. A couple other things that I got out of BABA. All right, so this was my worst trade today. Was looking for BABA to go higher. Now, BABA reports earnings tomorrow, and I said in yesterday's video I would only be holding it for 1 day, and unfortunately, this did not work for me. Right, right off the bat, I really had no chance with the stock today. I actually tried to kind of add in here, thinking it was just an oversold move on the open, and I was looking for like a bounce up to 164, 165. No bounce in this stock today. So what did I do? I just I stuck to what I was going to say, and I got out of this for a loss. Right. So like I said, a couple trades worked really well, couple trades not so much. Let me just go through a couple more stocks because the video is already 20 minutes long. But if you look at not just Hilton, there was also Hyatt calls today. Also, if you look at a couple of these travel stocks, like Expedia, right, completely reverted back and into support 20-day moving average. So instead of chasing this move, this might be better if you like Expedia in here. All right, so that's I'm going to skip the setup in Hyatt because it's kind of similar, and I like the Hilton better. I'm watching Google for tomorrow. All right, the price action's been pretty tight since this green bar, and I'm looking for this to resolve higher. Notice how the price action really hasn't been doing much. I would be looking for a move, maybe testing this 29.89 and then ultimately maybe taking out this level and going higher in the next couple of days. Again, just something I'm watching. What else do I have on my list? The home builders. There was some call activity in Lennar yesterday. Right, call positioning, right? But this thing, it just took out the new highs today, and maybe this will start to kind of make more and more new highs. We'll see. I think you could set your stop to that previous breakout level. Pulte was a name that was mentioned in the trading room today too. Also moving. There's a VPOC up here at 53. If you're looking for like a short-term move, that is where this thing could maybe consolidate once it gets to that VPOC. So again, short, very small looking target there. Zoetis was a name that I've been kind of positioning in and out of. I think I talked about this briefly yesterday. Managed to get a small target in there today as the stock got out to new highs. Also, CSX is one that I'm watching. All right, doesn't kind of fit what I mentioned about the Baltic Dry Index and some of the other information, but at least this thing is starting to bounce here after a lot of digestion. Right, lot of small digestion, and I would be looking for a move above value, which is around 35.66. All right, guys, that's it. Here again is the trade blotter for what I did. Moderna worked for a nice little day trade today. Why did I take this name? It just made a nice move outside of value and just a day trade. And I actually took this thing off right. I got lucky. I took this thing off right around the highs of the day. I also just reduced some risk in a couple winners. SEDG, decided to take that off. And yeah, that's it for today, guys. Have a great night. And bottom line is, be patient with this market. And kind of what I say almost every day with this week, right? And with some of these little divergences that we're seeing on the tape, don't get over the tips of your skis with risk. Remain flexible, in my opinion. And I'm not giving anybody advice or anything like that, but remain flexible. And I think have some dry powder in this market. And the more that you can kind of move with these daily swings that we're seeing in the price action and the breadth. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.